What's the craziest reason you've had to fire an employee? Employee 1 wearing earplugs on a string. Employee 2 comes up behind Employee 1 and decides to yank on the string, which pulls earplugs out of ears very fast. This causes a vacuum in the ear canal and effectively pops your eardrums outward. It hurts real bad. Employee 1 got mad, yelled, and possibly cussed Employee 2. Employee 2 decides he doesn't like Employee 1's attitude about the situation. Employee 2, who's an amateur boxer, punches 1 to lay him out on the floor. Employee 2 is a marvelous piece of work. All that amateur boxing must have knocked the sense right out of his head. Before this incident, Employee 2 graced me with a conversation. Why he felt the need to say these things to me, I don't know. Maybe this lends legitimacy to the theory that he had the sense knocked out of his head. I think it just gives insight into a crappy human. Employee 2 was married and had a newborn or toddler. Apparently, his underage teen niece would babysit with another friend keeping company. Employee 2 indicated he thought both teens were hot and had a number of ideas about them that were extremely inappropriate. He slashed my tire after I told him to go to work instead of sitting in the break room. He obviously didn't want to go back to work, so I think you did him a favor. I gave my secretary a document that I wanted incorporated into a letter I had written, and she hucked the document like a frisbee into her trash can. It was literally my only copy, so I had to walk over and fish it out. That was her last day. What the frick? Man, you must have more stories. How did she interview? She was already there when I started. She worked for someone else but had problems with that person, so they tried putting her with me. Who would have thought she had problems with another person? Had an employee, a nurse, who was drinking on the job, snuck vodka in a plastic water bottle. We became suspicious when she began behaving erratically. Then we noticed that she was super possessive of her bottle and never let it leave her sight or let anyone else near it. She messed up and left it at her desk when she went to the bathroom. So we sniffed it and she was busted. Hot mess that woman was. Almost identical to my story at my job. She had an irreplaceable water bottle. One day in a downpour, she had to go out to her car to get her magic water bottle. Came back loaded and soaking wet. She never made it back to her desk. And here I am wondering if with that last sentence they mean that she was fired for being obviously loaded, or whether she didn't make it back to her desk because she hit on a coworker, tripped and fell and then spewed up in her handbag. I was part of a group of IT contractors together for a large international project. The client would get us apartments to live in at each implementation site for 6 to 12 months. A member of my team got into a disagreement with the CTO when he came to visit our site, which resulted in her screaming personal attacks at him in the hallway when he tried to step outside to de-escalate the argument. She was fired on the spot but then proceeded to go back to the apartment provided by the company and completely wreck it. The site was in the middle of the desert and she had opened all of the windows and doors, turned the AC on max, stopped all of the drains and turned the water on, threw red nail polish all over the bathroom. It was the most extreme breakdown in a professional environment I've ever seen. I never learned of any follow-up, i.e. legal action. I think because the CTO was embarrassed he had to ask us to check her apartment since he'd already left town. While I didn't fire her, I was offered the chance to work with her again 12 years later via anonymous reference, and obviously rejected her as a candidate. Think twice about burning that bridge, or at least how you do it. I once had an employee Snapchatting as he drove an ambulance with a crew member and patient in the back through an intersection during a red light. Rubbing a pregnant co-worker's belly 3 times after being asked to stop and then asking her if her husband was good at doing the deed. I fired him and he asked if we could still be friends. No. Then he tried to file for unemployment after only working there for 3 weeks, part-time. We had a similar guy like that in our company. He was only with us for about 2 months before it happened. We were having our annual Christmas dinner and he was putting his arms around one of the managers all night and grabbing her hand when she got up to leave for the bathroom or whatever, and asking her where she was going. He wasn't even drunk and he was asked about 5 times to stop it before she actually shouted at him in the middle of the restaurant. Didn't see him around after that night. One of our delivery drivers was supposed to be training a new employee, basically driving around and introducing them to routes and customers and that kind of thing. Well, he told the new driver to just drop him off at the park down the street, and when my boss drives the 15 seconds to the park, he was doing smack with local homeless people. Literally doing smack with hobos at the park. So of course the dude got fired. Then maybe a month later we get a call from a customer saying that he was walking in the middle of a busy intersection with our company's shirt on. Guy had a crush on a female co-worker. He passed her a note at work one day with a gob of hand lotion inside it and the words, "I got really excited thinking about you earlier." The girl freaked out and went to management. The guy got escorted out. Had an employee pull a piece on me. This was after he got fired for threatening others at a Tier 1 help desk. Made everyone uncomfortable the entire time he was there. He's still in jail, it's been about 8 years now. I had an employee who got drunk on her lunch break, flipped her car, went to jail, mugshot with her company logo on her shirt. Perfect. Everyone is asking, our lunch break is 1 hour. Many employees leave to go out and eat. Potentially there were other substances involved. I work in pizza delivery and we had a guy back in the day, fellow manager, who tried to shut down the store 5 hours before the time that corporate set for us to close. He clocked every person out and sent them home and then just refused to take the phone calls or anything like that. He was fired immediately after our boss found out and he even tried to come into work the next day like everything was fine. We used to do crap like that at my store once or twice a year. We always said the oven broke down or the power went out. No one bothered to check and nobody ever got in trouble. We legitimately ran out of food multiple times and had to close because of it. I'd usually stay there and answer the phones because I think irate customers are the best thing ever. Picking up and telling them that everyone else is gone, I'm just there cleaning, and that we were completely out of everything on the menu, would usually get some sort of snarky, "Well, why did you pick up the phone?" kind of comment where I could just say, "To get it to stop ringing," and just wait for them to start cussing so I could hang up on them. Good God, I miss those days. As a former McDonald's employee, I can't imagine how on earth any of us would keep our jobs if we pulled some crap like this. I can't imagine any chain wouldn't be well regulated enough to stop this from happening under anything but the most extreme circumstances. I wasn't the manager, but watched the whole thing happen. A few years ago, I worked at a restaurant, and we had kind of an annoying new hire. One of those, "I'm too good for this" types. It was this kid's first job and first day out of training. One of his tables was a family with 2 small children who were being obnoxious, but hey, it's a family restaurant, that's expected. While walking away from the table, he muttered something along the lines of, "Shut up, you fricking kids." Except he didn't actually mutter, he spoke at normal volume. The mother overheard and was not pleased. He was sent home and invited not to return. "I'm going to start inviting people to not come back to things. Congratulations, you've been invited to frick off." One of our warehouse workers was a young man about 25 years old. He was suspected of having a substance problem, mostly because of absenteeism and that he just seemed off at times. One day, he called our office manager from the back parking lot of our building and said that he had an upset stomach and had pooped his pants. She told him she would try to find a change of clothes to bring out to him, but before she could, he ran into the building and into the bathroom off the lobby, trailing his accident smeared on his shoes onto the floor. He then took off the crap-filled pants and left them in the bathroom and ran back outside to his car. At that point, everyone else in the small office was running outside to escape the horrible smell. Our office manager found a pair of pants in someone's locker and took them to where the guy was parked, but turned around when she saw him standing beside his car with no pants or underwear on. While everyone else was figuring out how to deal with the doo-doo in the office, the guy got in his car and left. He showed back up 3 days later as if nothing had happened. He was told to head back home. I could never figure out why he ran inside. If you crapped your pants, wouldn't you just get in your car and drive home? I once crapped in my pants on my way to work, had some chicken that didn't agree with me. This was the start of a very bad case of food poisoning. I just turned around and went home, called work and told them I had food poisoning. Paid my sister to use our carpet cleaner to clean my car seat. I don't trust my toots anymore. I'm not the manager involved, but I think this fits the bill. A coworker of mine who was a little bit too into his car got snapped doing twice the speed limit. Instead of pulling over for the patrol car behind him, he decided to run for it. He led a police chase to the office and shook them off by hiding in the underground parking. The GM watched it happen from his office. He took the lift down, found the coworker's car, and told him not to bother getting out. But did it clear his wanted level? Yeah, but the stupid motherfricker ran over a cop leaving the garage. He's gonna need to hit the paint shop. Eggplant pic on the office cloud storage. How did you go about identifying the culprit to fire him? Luckily, it wasn't my job to do, but if I recall correctly, they identified him from the computer used to log in. In the details on the file itself, the type of phone used to take the photo, and the directory the file was in. There's a chapter from Let's Pretend This Never Happened about the author having to learn how to ask, "Is this your eggplant?" with a straight face while working HR for a faith-based organization that apparently had a problem with folks using their company emails to send each other eggplant pics. It's fantastic. For extra fun, there's a line from that chapter as follows. "Are these your Johnsons?" I highly recommend getting the audiobook as read by the author, Jenny Lawson. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Years back, a co-worker got into some trouble for something and got called into the owner's office. A few minutes later, you hear a huge thump. The idiot broke his hand on the boss's desk during their disagreement. He got a police escort off the property. Worked as a bartender at a restaurant. I was cashing out a waitress who decided to enter the bar to make herself a smoothie. After fumbling around, she dropped a wine glass from the hanger and it smashed all over the counter. I told her she's going to need to clean it up before I can finish cashing her out. She then begged me that she needs her tips right now as her friend who she owes money to is waiting outside and that she was going to deliver the money, come back and clean it up. She never came back and I had to replace all the ice and all the fruit garnishes on a busy weekend night because of broken bits of glass that landed all over it. Of course, the manager comes over to ask why the drink tickets are 10 minutes long and I told him what happened. They immediately went into the schedule and gave all her future shifts to other people. The waitress called the restaurant not even 5 minutes later to ask why her shifts had been forcibly given away, and the manager replied, "'Cause you're fired," and hung up. Had an employee pass out in his truck in a customer's driveway. Customers called me to report said employee had a glass pipe on his chest. Luckily, guy decides to call me instead of the sheriff. The employee was picked up and brought back to the shop. When asked what was going on, he stated, "I was on a break, it wasn't green herb, it was just spice." "Sorry, bud, I don't think this is going to work out." "Spice? Do you spice? Are you looking for the Suncut Bazaar?" I see you critters answering these stories and I love it. Let me know below if you understood the reference. Fired a guy in his first week for browsing and downloading adult flicks at work on his lunch break. On a computer in a large room that other people worked in, at a government organization. So caught him red-handed, warned him not to do that, already thinking this guy will be fired at the end of the day, but have to go through the channels, was a weekend shift, and then 2 hours later he does it again at the same place. At that point I had the VP's approval to just fire him, and we'll deal with the paperwork on Monday. Let him go, he's shocked but doesn't say much. Being the only manager on site, I take screenshots of the sites he's visited, forward it off to HR and the VP to document it all. A few days later, the guy's father calls the VP to complain about his son being fired. Guy was in his mid-20s. Apparently, the fired employee never thought him being fired on the day he was busted for browsing adult flicks on a government computer in a government office was the reason to be fired. And he never told his irate father about this. So the VP deals with this very diplomatically, saying employee was viewing inappropriate content at work, was warned, continued bad behavior. Father doesn't accept the explanation, so the VP starts reading off the list of sites that were visited. All of them were hardcore sites geared toward large African-American women. Fired employee was Caucasian. The real kicker to this was that the VP believed that the fired employee was listening in on his father's conversation via another phone. Just as the sites were being read off, there was a very audible click of that phone being hung up. My husband is a manager and his employee somehow had another employee's ID and then stole that person's check and cashed it. Caught it all on camera. She still denied it. In the legal field, that's called the shaggy defense. "But we saw you sign the paper." "It wasn't me." "We even caught you on camera." "It wasn't me." I hope this is a real thing between legal personnel. I had to send a guy to a remote gas and petroleum refinery site for an inspection. Previously, he had been reliable on most occasions. However, on this occasion, he never showed up for the pre-substance or alcohol test the day before he had to fly out and gave me a long-winded excuse, basically blaming his car troubles. At this point, I would have gone myself to the site, however, I was just back from a bone graft to my collarbone, so I wasn't going anywhere. The director made the final decision to send him anyway against my recommendations. We flew him to the site to do his on-site induction where he would do the D&A test anyway. Partway through his induction, he got up and left. I called him that night but never got an answer, so I checked his accommodation and the hotel claimed he had checked in within the last half hour. I was just glad nothing major had happened. Next morning I speak to the client and the client informs me that the staff member apologized for leaving abruptly and had to rush off and deal with some personal issues. I don't press it any longer. 2 hours goes by and I get a call from the client stating that they've kicked him off site because they've found him asleep on site, and when they woke him up, he became extremely aggressive. The client is furious about this and says we're a cowboy of an operation for sending someone like this and to fly someone up the next day to finish the job. That night, we have a conference call with the client stating that we were no longer going to be working for them due to this issue, costing our company roughly $1 million for the loss of the contract. We bring him the day after he flies back to ask about his actions. I'm supposed to head this up and get his side of the story, except before we even really get into discussing things, my director asks, "If we were to substance test you today, will you fail?" He answers, "Yes," and he's told he's being terminated instantly. He starts yelling at the top of his lungs and blaming his actions on everyone else. I told him he needs to leave straight away or police will get called. He does. He leaves then for the next month, and our admin receives emails about how I'm terrible at my job and I should be fired for not listening to his problems, which he had never spoken to me about. So yeah, that was the day I fired my brother and found out he was addicted to crystal. There was a lot going on post his termination, and me and my dad combined to pay for rehab costs. He never stayed both times he was sent. Then there was physical threats of attack to my mum and my family for not giving him money. That's where I cut contact. Every update since has been from my dad. He hasn't seen my mum. He's working during the day and studying at night. I hope this time he can do well. As for the services that our employer offered, previously he had been given aid for counseling due to depression. Out of those 12 sessions, he had gone to 3. The situation gave me some pretty severe anxiety and depression. You can blame the plot twist way that I've written this due to the fact that I've just watched season 1 and 2 of Black Mirror over the last few nights. In auto sales, one of our salesmen always seemed to be up to something. Between lying to all our customers, substance use, and constant fighting at home, he was impossible to manage. Unfortunately, he was the type that gave the rest of us a bad name. Eventually, he got into it with our GSM about several issues, and his go-to was to start making fun of our GSM's handicapped son. I had so much respect for our GSM, he took him in an office, told him he was terminated, and walked out, even though I know inside he was boiling with rage. I'm glad that guy's gone. And good riddance. Good gosh, did he want to be fired or something? It makes my mind spin that even if you harbor crappy opinions, you can somehow imagine that saying stuff like this won't get you fired. Not a manager, but I had to share my story. Worked at Jumbo Juice. Co-worker put bare hands into his pants and scratched his crotch at the register while helping a guest. When the guest commented, he put his fingers in the guest's face and said, "Smell it." "Smell that? That's the Jumbo." Wow. I had an officer under me. He was reported in a tree. I went to investigate the last place he was seen. He was still there, attempting to pepper spray birds. I wish I could have made that up. He was fired immediately. What's hilarious is that pepper spray has no effect on birds. They can't taste it and it doesn't irritate their eyes. I actually didn't know that. Good gracious, put him below subpar. Maybe that's why he was trying to pepper spray birds. Maybe he had heard it somewhere and wanted to see if it was true. I own a tree removal service. Hired a guy as a ground worker. He worked great the first 2 weeks, didn't complain, seemed to know the work, and I paid him well. The third week working for me, we did a job that consisted of 2 big box elders to be removed. It was 95 degrees that day. I told the guys, don't push yourselves too much, make sure you're getting enough fluids, and if you need a break, take one. The new guy drove his own vehicle to the job as he needed to leave that day 40 minutes early to make it to a dental appointment. We're like 40 minutes into the job and I notice he's moving really slow. Just looked really unmotivated and like he didn't want to be there. We had the customer's driveway blocked off with brush everywhere. At this point, I'm still climbing in the tree and I see the new guy driving through the customer's yard, which was like 2 acres, and then onto the road in a serious hurry. I called him probably 30 times to make sure everything was all right. Didn't hear back from him. My other employees had no idea and were in shock. They saw him hop in his truck and just dart. He decided right then and there, frick this, and just left. Still haven't heard from him to this day. I didn't terminate him. That's the closest I would have come to firing someone. I don't know if I would have fired him if he'd showed up again the next day, but he would have had to do some pretty good explaining with a sincere apology for not letting anyone know and having the rest of the guys pick up the slack. My construction company was building a new addition on a hospital. One morning, the president of the hospital called to inform me that he had just watched one of our laborers doing smack in his truck while on break. Went to the job site, talked to the kid. He said, "Yeah, but I waited till break time." You aren't supposed to drive your personal vehicle to the job site for liability reasons. Oh yeah, and you're not supposed to do smack, even on a break. We've had some winners over the years, but that kid took the cake. This was definitely one of those situations that was not funny when it happened, but is hilarious now. One employee was dealing white snow from the back door. Another was high on smack and nodding off while standing over a fryer. Another went off on an admittedly rude customer and got real mean. "Your wife must be sorry she married you." One called me an N-word, I'm white, and spat at me when I confronted him about the fact that his dad came in to say hi to him when he was out of work because his dad had a heart attack and was in the hospital. And one just sat in the dining room and refused to go back to work because a hockey game was on TV. Restaurant management is fun. I was a blacksmith at a federal historical site and I used to make nails as a demonstration. I didn't see this, but another blacksmith was making nails and a lady remarked, "They didn't have nails back then, 17th century, to which the blacksmith replied, "Yeah, right, lady, they scotch-taped Christ to the cross." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.